There is a hard limit to how big a sleeper cab can be when it rolls off the factory floor. Walk into a dealership today, order the largest sleeper money can buy straight from the manufacturer, and you'll get something around 77 inches. That's roughly 6.5 feet of living space behind the driver's seat. In the world of production trucks, that is the ceiling, the most livable factory sleeper on the market. Now remember that number, 77 inches, because right now, on highways across America, there are sleeper cabs rolling down the interstate that aren't 77 inches long. They're 261 inches long. That's over 21 feet of sleeper on a single truck behind a single driver. More than 3 times the size of the biggest sleeper the factory will ever sell you, all sitting on one chassis. So here's the question this video answers. If the factory says 77 inches is the limit, who is building sleepers 3 times that size? And how on earth do you make a truck that long actually drive, turn, climb a hill, and find somewhere to park for the night? By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what it takes to turn a freight hauler into a rolling home the length of a school bus. And you'll never look at a row of parked trucks the same way again. First, why does the factory stop at 77 inches in the first place? Because a production truck is built around a compromise. It has to turn corners in a city. It has to fit in a standard parking space at a truck stop. And it has to haul freight efficiently, because every inch you add behind the cab is an inch that hurts your turning radius and your fuel economy. The engineers stop at 77 because past that point, the truck stops being practical for the average fleet. But the average fleet isn't who the biggest builds are for. They're built for owner-operators, drivers who own their own trucks and spend more nights in the cab than in any house. For them, the compromise the factory made doesn't apply. They don't care about resale value to a fleet or squeezing every last mile per gallon. They care about living space. And when you stop optimizing for the average and start optimizing for the human who actually lives there, 77 inches goes out the window. The company that defines this world is ARI Legacy Sleepers, out of Shipshewana, Indiana, and their showcase reads like a catalog of the impossible. The rig that shows you how far this goes is a Kenworth W990 fitted with a 261-inch ARI sleeper. Let that sink in. The factory limit is 77 inches. This sleeper is 261, 21.5 feet of living space on one truck. Inside, it's not a bunk, it's a home, with a full kitchen, a dining area, a bedroom, and a bathroom. By any reasonable measure, it's an apartment bolted to a truck frame rolling down the interstate at highway speed. But here's what most people never think about. Making a sleeper that big is actually the easy part. Anyone with a welder and enough money can build a bigger box. The genuinely hard part, the part that separates a real engineering shop from a death trap, is making a truck that long actually drivable. And that problem is far stranger and far more dangerous than it sounds. Let me show you. Think about what you're really doing when you hang 21 feet of furnished apartment off the back of a truck. You're putting an enormous amount of weight a long way behind the rear axle. And weight behind the axle is the enemy of stability. Too much of it, and the truck wants to fishtail, the steering goes light, and climbing a steep grade becomes a fight against your own tail. So, to make a rig like this move safely, the builders have to re-engineer the foundation. The wheelbase, the distance between the front and rear axles, gets stretched dramatically. On some of these configurations, it runs past 400 inches, more than 30 feet between the axles, just to spread that load out and keep the truck balanced. Underneath sits that serious mechanical package, the 15-liter Cummins X15, making up to 605 horsepower and over 2,000 pound-feet of torque, an 18-speed transmission, a 6x4 drivetrain, full air suspension to soak up the road. That power isn't for speed. It's there to haul all that extra weight up a mountain pass without the truck slowing to a crawl. The challenge was never making the sleeper big. It was keeping a truck that long stable, balanced, and able to climb a grade with an apartment's worth of weight sitting behind the rear axle. That's the invisible work that makes the visible spectacle possible. And then there's the question almost nobody asks until they own one. Where do you even park something this long? This is a real daily problem, and it shapes the entire life of these trucks. A standard truck stop parking space is sized for a standard truck, A rig that's 21 feet longer in the sleeper alone may not fit in a normal spot at all, which means the driver has to plan routes around where a vehicle this size can legally and physically stop for the night. The same parking shortage that plagues every trucker in America hits these mega rigs twice as hard, because there are even fewer places that can take them. The size that makes them magnificent is also the thing that makes every single night a logistics puzzle. The bigger the home, the harder it is to find a place to set it down. Here's the detail that ties it all together, and it's the one outsiders miss. For all the kitchens and bathrooms and 21-foot sleepers, these are not motorhomes. They are not buses. They are real, working, registered Class 8 trucks. They still pull freight. They still pass DOT inspections. They still run under the same hours of service rules, the same weight limits, the same anti-idling laws as every plain white fleet truck on the road. That's why the luxury sits on top of real engineering, not instead of it. The independent heaters, the auxiliary power units, the deep battery banks that let the apartment run with the engine off overnight. That's the same survival technology a bare-bones working truck depends on, just scaled up to power a home. These rigs don't escape the realities of trucking. They carry all of them, and then add an apartment on top. And it all comes back to that very first number, 77 inches, the factory limit. Everything we've seen today exists in the gap between that limit and what drivers actually want. The factory builds for the average fleet, for efficiency, resale, and turning radius. But the road is full of people who aren't average, who looked at 77 inches and decided it wasn't enough, and who went to builders like ARI Legacy to make something the factory would never make, a 261-inch sleeper, 21 feet of home behind a single driver. None of these came off an assembly line. Everyone started with a driver who wanted something that didn't exist yet, and a builder willing to stretch a frame past 30 feet to create it. So, the next time you pass a long row of trucks parked for the night, look closer at the ones that seem too long, too tall, too finished. Behind those walls might be a full kitchen, a real bathroom, or someone's entire life. That dark, quiet, impossibly long cab isn't just a truck. For somebody, it's the only home they want. Now, I want to hear from you. Be honest. Could you live in 21 feet of truck, parked in a different lot every night, the open road as your only backyard? Or would the parking alone drive you insane? Tell me down in the comments. I read them all.